We're continuing in our David series that Jim Bob and I both preached in, and it really just fell in an awesome way that the youth group get to talk about the story of David and Goliath this week. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and I think it's very, very meaningful to a youth because it's believed that when David faced Goliath, he was between the ages of like around 12 or 15. Kind of put that into perspective for you. And so last week we led up to this battle, and we saw that 1 Samuel 17 opens up with this battle scene, these two armies on the opposite sides of a valley getting ready to start fighting. And that the Philistines, the ones that are fighting against God's people, against Israel, they have this champion. And in the Bible, that word champion, it's only used for Goliath. And it means the man between two armies. But I like to just use the beginning. He's the man. He's monstrous. And then immediately cuts to this scene of this little boy, this youth, 12, 15 years old, out in the fields tending some sheep. Probably seems a little absent-minded because he's thinking about God all the time. And his dad, who's aged, calls him in because all of his older brothers, they're fighting the war. And, the dad's probably living a little vicariously through his sons, and David wants to be bigger like his older brothers. And so David's dad sends him to the battle to say hi to his brothers and to bring back word. I can just picture this little boy and his old father, kind of living out the war through the information they get. So David's asked to bring back a token. When he gets there just as Goliath stands in the valley to defy the Israelites and to curse them and their God. And David's incensed. He's like, how could this even be happening? Who's going to stand up and face this giant? And he looks around and everyone is afraid, even the king. And that's kind of where we left off last week. And I'm going to just kind of read out the rest of the story. And then I'm going to let these youth kids come up and give their perspective on facing the giant and what that looks like to them. So David can't wear Saul's armor, the king's armor. He takes it off. And it says he picks up 5 smooth stones from a stream. This is starting chapter 17, verse 40. And puts them in his shepherd's bag. Then, armed only with his shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. Goliath walked out towards David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at this ruddy-faced boy. "Am I a dog," he roared at David, "that you come at me with a stick?" And he cursed David by the name of his gods. "Come over here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals," Goliath yelled. David replied to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head." And that's important. "And I will kill you and cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us." As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone, for he had no sword. Then David ran over and pulled Goliath's sword from his sheath. David used it to kill him and cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah gave a great shout of triumph and rushed after the Philistines, chasing them as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron. The bodies of the dead and wounded Philistine were strewn all along the road from Sharam as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the Israelite army returned and plundered the deserted Philistine camp. David took the Philistine's head to Jerusalem, but he stored the man's armor in his own tent. So they're going to get up and tell you their perspective of facing their giants. And it's really, really awesome to be part of this youth group. And I can look at them and see so many of those similar characteristics of David. They're young. They really are. And it makes me feel even older to hang out with them than I really am. but also to look at their perspective, their desire to know God and to live right and to be right, be righteous as He is righteous and in God's righteousness, and so it's awesome to be a part of that. And it's really a blessing for me that I get to spend Sunday nights with the youth group. It really is. And so this first gentleman who's going to come up here and tell you about facing his giants, after I thought about it, these guys, volunteered to speak. Really, I forced them, but they all represent pivotal moments in our youth group history. So Ike here started attending youth group with his brother Trey, who's older now. He's graduated the youth group and into our college group. Oh, sorry, wrong Isaac. This Isaac over here. I didn't look back. That was my fault. Anyway, when he and his brother started attending the youth group that week, our youth group tripled. Because before that, there was just one youth group member. And so they kind of represent the start of something really, really awesome to watch. And so I've been able to spend quite a bit of time with Ike, and he's always anxious and willing to, I shouldn't say anxious, he's always excited and willing to take part in the discussions that we have. And so I'm really looking forward to him and his story of facing his giant. So Ike, come on up here. Woo!
Well, if we haven't met, my name is Isaac Turner, not to get confused with the other Isaac. And the giant that I have faced in my life is bullying, because from a young age I was bullied from because of my teeth, my looks, my personality. And so then I started wising up as I matured and started listening to family members, specifically my uncle, and who was always telling me to not listen to what they were saying and to just let them do what they want. It doesn't concern you really. And so yeah, and I started listening to him and everyone else. Sorry, lost my train of thought. But I've also been listening to this one song called Coward of the County by Kenny Rogers, and just one line has been repeating in my head for years. And it's, you don't have to fight to be a man, because you don't have to listen to take it and just let it consume you. You can just take it and go, well, sure, that's your opinion, but my opinion is that I don't have to listen to you and take what you're saying about me, because it's bad and mean. That's basically it for me.
I really, really like this story, especially in the perspective of David, and I'll get to talk about it here in just a minute. But this next young lady who's coming up also represents a pivotal moment in the history of our youth group. When Kiara and her cousin Brittany started attending youth group, we started making the transition away from only having guys in the youth group, which was pretty awesome. So now we have a much more balanced youth group, and there's girls there to kind of calm the guys down a little bit and discourage them from their crazy ways, if you'll believe that. Anyway, so she's going to talk next. Come on up here.
So I don't know most of you personally, but I do have some great friends in the audience and two pretty cool people behind me. And my mom and my aunt and my other aunt and my uncle and my cousin. But, so I've always been more of a quiet person around people that I'm not familiar with, although a lot of people like to think that I'm a good public speaker, so I don't know. I'm not familiar with, so on the first day of school is always a challenge, because I don't ever know if the people that I'm going to meet are going to be friendly or even relatively civil towards me. And so it's always a struggle. So, but and every year it's kind of different. And I am shaking because I have not eaten today. Like this year even is different because my school made the transition from just normal 7 class periods a day to block schedule. So I have 4 different classes every other day. It's just a little weird. And I definitely think that I was fortunate to have met some really cool people this year, some very interesting people. And really, to get me through the school year, I depend a lot on them because they're always there when I need the support that I can pull from my friends. It's nice to have them there, so, yeah.
So last but not least is Isaac Baker, and I can say I've spent quite a bit more time with Isaac than the rest of the youth group. He's my brother-in-law. He was the founding member of our youth group. He was the one that was there before Ike and Trey started attending, and so he's been through it. He's been through thick and thin. You know, he's always been around, but at the same time, it's been awesome to be a part of being a little bit closer to him and watching him grow. From a boy into a man of God, and to watch that transition and to see him become more and more obsessed with worship and knowing and asking questions. And so again, it's just really awesome to be part of that experience, and so I look forward to hearing from him.
So let's pull my notes real quick. I just like to say something real quick. I was just thinking about whenever Nathan was talking about how at one point the youth group was literally just me and Nathan. Literally, like what we would do for youth group is we would go over to his house, we would eat brownies, and we would play Call of Duty, and that's what we did for youth group. So we've changed quite a bit from the beginning. Yeah, and whenever Trey and Ike showed up, that was really the most exciting day ever because the entire population of our youth group tripled. Like, the statistics are crazy. Okay, anyways. So about 2 weeks ago, Nathan asked me, youth, what's a giant that you have faced in your life, and how has God helped you face that giant? And I thought about that for a long time, and honestly, I haven't faced many giants in my life. Like, I'm young, I haven't really gone through a lot of like big life-changing events, but definitely one that kept coming to mind was 3.5 years ago, whenever my parents they set us down and they told all us kids that we were going to be moving to Northwest Arkansas to start a church. And in this situation, I guess that the giant was the fear of like unknown peers and an unknown future in a new place, just lots of change. I remember my initial response whenever they told me was just excitement. Like, I don't know how else to say that. It wasn't really like a positive feeling or a negative feeling, just like a chilling kind of like shocking feeling. I mean, everything that I had known, like it's just like everything that I knew that was stable, that was steady and constant was at that point going to change. I'd grown up with the same group of friends my entire life, the same kids that you see every day at school, in the one class that we had at school for the whole day. They were the same kids that I went to church with every Sunday in the Sunday school class, and I was moving away from my siblings family that still lived in Conway, and I had just turned 13, so I had just gotten involved in the youth group at the church we were at in Conway. And I'm positive some of you in here can relate that like people really don't know how difficult a move to a completely unknown and new place is until it's experienced firsthand, you know? Like that's just, and then like, even if you haven't moved though, you could still relate because everyone in their life experiences moments of fear of unknown futures and lots of change and for me, a kid who had been homeschooled and private schooled his entire life was all of a sudden put in the Springdale public school system halfway through the spring semester, a new school, new peers. I didn't know a single person there. I'd never been bused into school. That was something that was completely new. Changing classes, that was unheard of, that you had different teachers for different subjects. And then for someone with severe ADHD like myself, I remember walking like with my schedule into a class and like seeing, okay, this should be a Mr. such and such class, and there'd be a woman standing there, and I just be like, well, I know I did something wrong. I've been going to the school for 7 weeks. I should know this by now. But anyways, yeah, my watch tells me the week. I kind of got labeled as the Christian kid. At my school, I had kind of a hard time making friends. People would be like, oh, this family moved up here to start a church. Don't talk to him. He'll preach the word of Jesus into you and just stuff like that. And the reason it was scary is just because up until that point, everything that made me normal and regular, like being a Christian, everything that I've been treated like, that was treated normally about myself was the things that made me different than everybody else. And that was difficult. I was able to make a lot of good friendships in the following years. Well, not a lot, like a handful of good friendships, guys that I was able to share music with, and a bunch of good, like, faithful teachers I was able to talk with after school and have long conversations with. But I think that the thing that helped me the most through this whole giant of a change in my life was worship, being able to be involved in the worship team. Bass was my instrument. That's what I enjoyed playing. And over the years, I wanted to play more guitar on the worship team. And over the years, I got to witness God bring many guitarists, vocalists, drummers, keyboardists, sound guys, all of which have strongly benefited the church. And up until a couple months ago, no bass players. So I was put on the team every week because of that, like because other people, could take weeks off and stuff like that, but we only had one bass player up until Jimmy. Some of y'all know Jimmy. Can play up here like once a month now. So that kind of forced me every week to spend hours listening to worship music, and I was listening for different bass tones and techniques and scales that they were using in their music. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was really soaking in a lot of really good lyrics. Lyrics that really helped me through this giant of a change in my life. And one that definitely comes to mind is a song we've done here at City Point before. I think it perfectly describes exactly how I felt and how I feel. It's a song by Switchfoot that we've done here before. It's called Where I Belong. And the first verse just says, I'm feeling like a refugee, like it don't belong to me. The colors flash across the sky. This air feels strange to me, feeling like a tragedy. I take a deep breath and close my eyes. And I remember feeling exactly like that, getting off the bus or getting out of the car whenever my dad would drive me to school and walking inside like, I don't know where my first class is. I don't know any of my teachers' names. I know no student here. I have no friends. I was strongly sheltered up until then. And then my eyes were really open to just the brokenness in our society. And that's where the second verse kind of describes, I feel like where my heart is right now. It's just saying, feels like we're just waiting while our hearts are just breaking. Feels like we've been fighting against the tide. I want to see the earth start shaking. I want to see a generation finally waking up inside. And I feel like that definitely describes like how this movement from everything that made me normal was not the thing that made me different. I think that sums up how I feel right now. Like, I want to see a change in this generation. Like, like I want to see a revival. I want to see, you know what I mean? But anyways, to wrap everything up, Nathan asked me, what is a giant that I've faced in my life, and how has God helped me face that giant? I think the giant in this situation is not as much the physical relocation as it was the fear of the unknown. And I think the way he's helping me face this giant is by starting to develop in me a heart for worship. And then I'd like to close out with the final verse of the song I was quoting earlier, and I feel like it's just a good end. It says, "On the final day I die, I want to hold my head up high. I want to tell you that I tried to live it like a song. And when I reach the other side, I want to look you in the eye and know that I arrived in a world where I belong." Thank you, guys.
Now, I remember being in the youth group and, hearing the story of David facing his giant. And in a lot of ways, felt like, the things in my life are not that big. But I think it was awesome that the points, the giants that these guys face were all giants that David had to face before Goliath. David was the youngest. He was the runt of the litter. We actually have examples in this story of his older brothers making fun of him. And David's response was, "Your opinion doesn't matter, because I know that I serve a living God." And David sat in the fields and, played his harp and spent a lot of time alone, and probably didn't get along with most people because his perspective was a little bit different. But then he was told that he would be the future king of Israel. As a child, that his life was going to become completely different. That he was going to go from this kind of secluded, on my own, staying away from other people because of the things they say, to being God's chosen one. That's extremely significant. It's also awesome that when we get to this point in the story and David talks to Goliath, David is telling Goliath what's gonna happen. David says to Goliath, you've come up against the God of heaven's armies, the God of Israel. He's alive. He acts. He's not passive. He doesn't sit back, but he's active. And then he says, "I'm going to kill you and I'm going to chop off your head." And I can't help but think that this would immediately cause Goliath to think about something that happened earlier in 1 Samuel. See, the Philistines had captured the Ark of the Covenant. That was the centerpiece of the Holy of Holies. It actually talks about God's presence coming down and manifesting some kind of physical, visual presence there in the Holy of Holies with that Ark. Well, the Philistines captured it. And they took it to a city where they had a temple set up to their god Dagon. And they took the Ark of the Covenant and they set it at the feet of Dagon, because they had conquered the Israelites and captured the Israelites' God. Well, you know what happened? They went to sleep, and when they woke up the next morning, the statue of Dagon had fallen down, face down on the ground. And so they'd been broken off. Now, this wasn't a city that Goliath lived in, but everyone in the city started getting tumors. And so they took this Ark of the Covenant, this manifestation of God, and they moved it to the city of Gath. That's where Goliath was from. And everyone in that city started getting tumors. And so they ended up just giving it back to the Israelites. They're like, let's just give it back. We don't want any part of this anymore. See, the Israelites' God is active, not passive. And I think it's even more interesting that God doesn't just act in things, but he acts in people. So now David faces Goliath with just a sling and says, "I'm going to kill you and I'm going to chop off your head." Not with this. That's not going to work. David called it ahead of time. And so after he killed Goliath, he pulled his sword, chops off his head, and then the Israelites get to chase the Philistines home. You know how easy it is to win a battle whenever the opposing side's running away? And so I think it's interesting. I mentioned this to the youth group. It was awesome whenever I heard it or learned it or heard it said to me. I shared it with the youth group last week. Oftentimes in this story of David, which character do we place ourselves in? Well, we're facing our giants, right? So we're David. We want to be brave like David. We want to be courageous. We want to rely on the Lord. But ultimately in the story, we're not David. The Bible's pretty clear with its representation of characters throughout history. And this was a story that happened, but it's also a picture of things that were to come. We're the Israelites. I mean, that's the whole Old Testament represents the journey of people, the journey of the church as represented as the Israelites. David's a picture of Christ. So yes, we do need to take on these qualities of courage and honor and bravery and standing up for the glory of God, because God's going to get his glory. But when it's all said and done, the Savior in the story is Jesus. In fact, in Mark 8:31, Jesus called it. He foreknew his victory. He said how it was going to end. In 8:31, it says, "Then Jesus began to tell them the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead." He looked at death and he said, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to chop off your head." He called it. And so now, as we face our giants, and our giants could be anything. These are 3 really good representations of what facing a giant might look like. But it could be anything in your life. A new job, trouble at work, trouble at home, anything that's bigger than you. When you face that, you're not fighting for the victory in that situation, because the victory's already been won. Jesus died to defeat that giant. And now we just get to run after the armies of evil and slay them as they try to get away. So I want you guys to think about that as you go out this week. As you face your giants, realize that the burden of the victory doesn't lie on your shoulders, but that we serve a God who's active, who takes part in our life, and not just takes part, but fights for us as a warrior. Let's pray.